I'm just going to do my thing. I need to switch back and forth tabs between the session and the PowerPoint, or sorry, slide deck. I'm aging myself. And so I will periodically go back and forth to check. But I'm just going to do my thing. And thank you all for participating. It's Saturday morning, so I appreciate it. So my name's Elliot Ramos. I'm a data journalist with NBC News. I was formerly at WBEZ. I was the data editor there. One of the things I've been doing at NBC, or of the things, is covering a pandemic. So a lot of the stuff I've been working on lately has been dealing with vaccination rates, hospitalizations, and sort of like anything that's like reopening or recovery metrics. So like transportation, sort of like where people are with like concerts and stuff, like all sorts of things that sort of like point the metric of like whether or not we're returning to some semblance of normal. And when I was at BEZ, I did a lot of stuff on fines and fees, towing, tickets, and impounds, a lot of stuff with ProPublica Illinois, like Melissa Sanchez and David Eads, who are awesome and also doing some presentations this weekend. But one of the things I want to get into is Data Viz and fun with Data Viz. Start the slideshow. Data journalism is essentially just counting things. One of my professors said this one time, and it actually stuck, and it's kind of funny how true it actually is. I'm going to just start out with some primers. They're fun, they're delightful, and I'm going to use tacos as a proxy for talking about data. Very simple, like it's just counting things. So if we're starting with just a very simple basis of like how many things are happening, I have 4 tacos here. This is how many tacos I had yesterday. They were small. And then I'm going to apply one more level of abstraction and just say how many tacos I had on this date, Friday. So now I have how many and dates. I'm going to go another level back and say how many tacos did I have this week. So I have 4 tacos on Friday, 5 tacos on Tuesday. They were small tacos. The reason I'm talking about dates and times is I'm actually talking about intervals, and I'll get into that in a little bit. I'm going to go one more layer to say what kinds of tacos did I have. So I had 3 beef tacos and then 2 beef tacos on Friday. And then I'm going to add chickens to it. So say I had chickens versus beef tacos. So I can now add a level of categories, which are called categorical variables in data. And this is just now like applying different types of data types to things. You can see here on the visualization, I've taken the tacos and put an axis on them, X and Y. This is now because I have time series data, and I'm able to apply it on an axis. Usually with time series visualizations, you use an X-axis to denote time and the Y-axis to denote the value. One little trick I've taught folks is that if whenever you say yes and you nod, that's an easy way to remember the Y-axis. And now that thing's going to be stuck in your head forever. So I'm taking the chicken and the beef taco visualization, and I'm sort of abstracting it to basically like a bar chart. I'm going to make things a little simple here and start applying dates to it. And I'm going to start applying values and take away the tacos. And now you can see here I've sort of formed a grouped bar chart using the categories. If I want to, I can stack it. And now I have a proportion that you can see the values of categories, and on the left side you have the axis of values, and on the bottom x-axis you have the dates. I'm going to quickly check in on the chat and see what's going on. Everybody good? You can just type in yes or no. Anybody having issues at hearing things? All right, I'm just no reply in the chat, so oh sweet. I'm glad everybody likes the taco references. I thought they were kind of funny and delightful little tacos, and they're little happy tacos. So here I've just made a stacked bar chart. And the reason one level is I'm going to ask like, where did I have the tacos? So here's a map of Chicago. And maps are same kind of, they have axes, they have X and Y axes. They also have a Z axis, which I'm not going to get into in this presentation. But here I have 5 tacos I did in Lakeview and 4 tacos I did in Logan Square. I understand that might be contentious for folks because there's obviously some better tacos in Logan Square. I'm not going to get into that. But all that's to say is that I went into this to talk about data types. Whenever you're dealing with data, spreadsheets, or anything else, texts are called categorical variables. Numbers are anything that you can do math with, are numeric values that you can call integers or floats. Anything that deals with time or date are temporal data, and anything that deals with location are geospatial data. There's also another layer of that, like that you hear a lot with other stats wonks or with coding experts, where you hear the word text is often referred to as a string. This is especially if you're programming. Numerical values are integers or floats. The difference is integers are whole numbers and floats have decimal points. Time and dates. They're called date time or intervals if you're dealing with stats. And then location has all sorts of vernacular around it, geolocation, shapefile, stuff like that. Data types are important because they kind of determine what visualizations you can and cannot do. I often, when I was working at different places, and a reporter would come up to me and say, hey, I have this data, can I make this chart? And I have to be like, not necessarily, because the data is not formatted in a way that you can tell that story or tell that or make that kind of chart with the available data. So I'm going to get a little bit into chart types. So if you only have like the number of an item, the number of a category, you're pretty much limited to a pie chart. It's kind of why it's like the poor stepchild of the visualization family. And if you have time series or anything that's like week, date, month, you can break it down on an axis. Then you could start doing time series graphs like line charts, bar charts, area charts. And then you can have different variations of that by grouping them or stacking them. But also, if you're dealing with design aesthetics, you do so within reason. Having line charts that have like greater than a few categories starts to get a little bit busy. While the software will allow you to do it, it's typically not a good thing to do. Other chart types that we're going over, scatter plots. You see this with all the dots on an X and Y axis. These are used to show relationships between two categorical variables. So if you have something that has one set of values, like say shootings, and then another set of values that say lights out for 311 complaints, you can see if there's a relationship between those two instances over time. It's also used to figure out correlations. Flow charts, org charts. If you ever worked in a place where it has the org chart in Outlook, or if you're doing any kind of flow chart that shows like the way that something goes progressively through something via different buckets of categories, those are called Sankey diagrams or org charts. Here I have a Sankey diagram that I made when I was doing stories on Chicago's impound system. So on the far left side are like the types of tows, which can be like a tow for service that somebody like a police officer calls in, or a meter maid calls in, or the whatchamacallit, the boot van. On the bottom side are the vehicle impoundment programs, which are tows that are used in commissions of crime or alleged crimes. And then I abstracted that one more layer by bucketing all the different types of tows into like, here's all the people that got towed for the winter parking ban. Here's all the people that got towed for ticket debt. Here's all the people that got towed for fire hazards, or like being in front of a fire hydrant and stuff like that. And then I was able to figure out or show visually where all those cars were going to. So all the cars, Chicago, and for those who don't know, I did a lot of coverage on impounds and the towing system and the contractor. But 1 in 4 cars was basically sold off in this program, and I wanted to sort of visualize how that looks, so people were able to see like this really complex system that had like 94,000 cars, and then where all those cars went, and about a quarter of them were sold off for less than $200 a piece. I'm gonna at this point check in on the chat, see how everyone's doing. Oh, okay. Thank you, Paula. I will speak a little bit slower. Then there's also visualizations that deal with groupings of things where you're trying to show hierarchy. This is what's called a packed circle chart. And there's also versions of this data where it's like called a tree map. You usually see them like in budget data. But this is actually a story I'm working on right now, where I took all the states that have legal recreational marijuana, and I went through all their budgets, appropriation data, and was trying to figure out where they were spending all that money, because it's an issue about where these sin taxes go. And I was trying to figure out, like, are we actually spending it on where we're spending it, or is it going to general funds, or is it how much of it's going to education, and how much of it's going to restorative justice programs, which are programs that are meant to sort of, I don't think they could ever make up for, but like acknowledge the fact that the war on drugs was disproportionately harming some communities more so than others, and putting special grant programs that would do that. So this is a visualization of where those marijuana funds are. Just for reference, United States, about 11 states took in about $3 billion in tax revenue from marijuana last year. And then this is the same data, but visualized on a tree map, which is shows, you see these a lot on budget stories when they're trying to show how much funds are going to like the police department or how much funds are going to streets and sanitation. But this is a way of showing hierarchy based off proportions. And map data. So a primer on how data maps work is that there's 3 basic things to understand. Points, which everybody kind of knows when they drop in on their Google Maps or anything else, are a lat and long or x and y value on a plane or an axis. So when you're on Google Maps and you drop a dot, it's a set of coordinates, and that is just a point. The next layer above that is lines or paths, and this is when you have a collection of points. So every time you use Google Maps, it forms a path on a plane that are just a series of collected points, but most of the time they don't connect to form a boundary. When they do form a boundary, or it's called a polygon on a map file, is a series of points that form a boundary, and often these are called political boundaries. So because land can have like actual mass and features that show like shoreline, those are sort of set based off the geographic features. But when we talk about like neighborhood names, countries, I think there's a John Lennon song, like there's no countries. This is kind of those are political boundaries, and they're kind of, we make them, they're an abstract that doesn't exist other than anything of what we make of it. But those are polygon files. I'm going to check in real quick. Oh, yeah, I can, well, I can talk forever about towing, so don't get me started. For those of you that don't know, I do a lot about the winter parking ban, or used to. And it's this thing that's been around for 40 years. And it kind of like really grind my gears about like, why do we still have this thing when none of it works properly? And long story short, it's just to give me to a contractor after the second daily privatized the city's towing. And their towing go from November to December goes up 30%. And almost everybody gets their cars back, but that's after you've paid out the impound fees. And it's just, it's a money grab. I can get on that soapbox forever, but I will not. So working with text data, anything can be data, a document, an email. Like once you start applying categories to it. So if I'm thinking about an email, the body text of the email itself is kind of like nothing. But if you think about like the subject header, the to, the from, and the date and times, you can start to make like structured data from that. And when I talk about structured data, I'm talking about how you basically organize the data to sort of like once it's organized and structured in a way, you can actually start performing analysis on it. So most data that I work with, and that most data that people tend to work with, are spreadsheets. And spreadsheets are columns and rows. And I kind of think about that song X's and O's because I'm a dork. And the columns and rows are very specific things when you're dealing with tabular data. The columns are categories, which go back to that data type that we were talking about. Each of the columns have to be a type of category. So they have to all be text, or all be a number value, or all be a date. And then the rows typically are the individual records. So if you're dealing with a data set of like crime data, all those individual rows should be a unique crime event. All the columns, dates, types of crime and stuff like that should be categories that are specific to that data type. I keep going on to data types because once you start grasping like what data types are and what the limitations are, you start to realize that you can play around with it more. And we're getting to sort of the hands-on part of this. So I can do some coding in Python. I use SQL. I know some folks use pandas or R. I also use pandas. Or like if you're doing stats programs, you can use SAS. Visualization languages, which also can include pandas. You can also have JavaScript. Leaflet is a library if you're using maps. And they're really awesome, useful tools. The problem is that too often there's a lot of like sort of front-loaded work that you have to do or learn and know before you can actually start playing with those languages. And I think that sometimes, more often than not, it's a barrier for people to actually have fun or learn with it because they don't know the programming language, right? You might understand something conceptually or something that you want to do or visualize. You're like, I just need to make it do the thing. I think that sometimes the programming languages kind of intimidate folks, but you really only need to use those if you're dealing with big data. More often than not, 95% of the time, you can just do it in Excel. And then on the visual side of things, though, I'm a big proponent of using out-of-the-box templates. Now, sometimes that can backfire. This is the case when Google made a product called Google Fusion Tables, and a lot of news organizations built maps and apps around that platform, but they've since retired it. But it was a really good way of like, I'm going to stick my spreadsheet in the thing, and it's going to geocode and make my map, and then I can publish it online without having to code or anything else. It gives me an embed code like a YouTube video. But so some of the options that are available now are still Google Charts, which you can make it within Google Sheet itself. Plotly, which I believe is a paid service. Data Wrapper and Flourish are also ones that news organizations use. For this presentation, I'm going to use Flourish. And then Carto and Mapbox are mapping platforms. So you can kind of like charts, play around with the data, and then it spits out an embed, and you can use it that way. I'm going to slow down for a second and check in on the chat. Oh, Data Studio. That is a really good option, too. Jupyter Lab. All right, I'm going to start real quick. Get this. Which software do you prefer to data visualizations or use software on different platforms? So I haven't used Canva, but I like using Flourish. I know they have Canva integration. I like Flourish just because sometimes I use it kind of like a sketch pad, right? Like I'm able to plug in data and then play around with the visualizations a lot. Jupyter Lab, that's really cool. I didn't know they had a standalone desktop. I use Jupyter Notebooks, and then I will create sometimes use a visualization in it, but I more often than not use Jupyter and Python notebooks to clean up big data sets and winnow it down to a smaller data set and then work with it in Excel, or then move it over to a platform like Flourish or Data Wrapper. Oh yeah, thank you for sharing the toolbox there. That's actually a really good thing. And Data Studio is also a really good option. Oh, cool. You guys are awesome. You guys are just really sharing some stuff. Thank you guys. Thank you for being really collaborative too. It's one of the things I like about FOIA Fest, and one of the things I like about the Chicago journalism community is that we all help each other out. So thank you for all sharing on that. I'm going to quickly go back to the slideshow, which is wrapping up, and then we're going to get into some hands-on stuff. Actually, that is it, hands-on stuff. So I'm going to do a couple of quick and dirty presentations with some data. And then I'm going to show how I can just plug it into Flourish, which is app.flourish.studio. It's I think it's a company that's out of the UK, and they started becoming really popular with newsrooms. One, because it was free, but two, you can just plug the data in and then save it, and then it publishes out an embed link. And it does a lot of the heavy lifting. The background is using D3, but it doesn't require you to sit there and adjust all the parameters in D3. At my current job, we use D3 templates to a graphics rig, which is very similar to the graphics rigs used by NPR. The issue with that is that sometimes you're monkeying around with code and just to make a line chart. I'm not kidding. Once I'm just to make a bar chart do a certain thing on the deadline, it took an hour, and then versus using an out-of-the-box template, or sometimes just exporting it as an image file and then just running it as an SVG file that you just put on in the article, depending on your CMS or the software you're using. It's a time saver, right? You don't want to be reinventing the wheel every single time just to convey basic information. So I use Flourish as my default sort of sketch, and then once we move it up to an actual platform, we then integrate it into our visualization graphics rig. Okay, checking in, and then I need to share my share this entire screen. Yep, there we go. All right. Whoa. Sorry about that, guys. So I'm going to, as an exercise, I'm using open data. It's accessible, that no FOIA needed. I'm sorry, I know it's FOIA Fest, but it's just ready access data. So I'm using the data portal of the active business license. This is a subset of the total historical business licenses in Chicago, but I'm just going to, keeping on our theme, try to see how many have taco in their actual business name. In Chicago, they have the DBA, which is the doing business as name, which is like what's on their front facing sign in their window versus their legal name or entity. So like you see if there's like a McDonald's LLC or something versus like McDonald's. Here's all this. I could just do a quick look at the way that this data is structured. We have unique IDs over here on the far left side, license numbers, account numbers. These all have different data types. So when I'm looking at start with a data set, I try to look at the dimensions of it, which is to say how many columns are in it and what are the data types, and also what are the just the size of it. So right here at the bottom, I'm seeing I'm working with 55,000. If you're working with Excel, your limitations are based off machine performance and also a million rows of data. Anything bigger than that, and then you have to start using like a programming language to look at it. Or just like a Postgres database and using SQL to query things. And then that's when you start to need to know like the language around how to just like access, like I need to know how many happened on this day. One of the nice things about the data portal is that I can do like filtering directly on the site and then winnow down the data set to something that's smaller and more usable. So I'm going to add a filter to this, and then I'm going to ask it to see how many have doing business names as. Going to switch the query to contains, and I'm going to do tacos or taco. And so what it shows is there's 258 businesses in Chicago that have taco in their doing business as name. So there might be more tacos. Like I think of one in Andersonville that's like Cantina something or other, or I think it might have closed. But like if they serve tacos and then their name is something completely different, they're not going to show up in this query. And but this is just as an example here. And then I'm going to choose to export this data, and then do a CSV, which is a comma separated value. And I can just download that data, show it in my Finder. And here you have a listing of Chicago tacos. Any question on how I pulled that data? I'm going to check in on the chat. Oops, that is lots of screen meta-ness. Okay, anybody have any questions? Are all good? Thumbs up. Okay, sweet. Thank you all also for being patient. I'm not sure how the video software is working. I'm not enabled to see everybody else. But yeah, thank you for being patient with the thumbs up in the chat, and I really appreciate it. So I'm going to take the business license data. Kind of like Julia Child, the data is already in the oven. I pull the data, and here's a mapping program I use. I just tossed something really big on folks. Wait, you guys can't see it. Share. Okay. I'm using a data program called QGIS. It is it's used for geospatial analysis. A lot of urban planners use it. It's a free program. It has a pretty sort of lengthy install because you have to install some packages and dependencies on it. But one of the things I'm able to do is I import the data into this program and then run it against other files that are on the data portal. So in the city of Chicago on our open data platform, I'm able to get a map file of Chicago itself based off the neighborhoods or community areas. Sorry. And I see something in the chat. One second. I can get to that question later on about how to organize emails and FOIAs. So for this guy, I imported a shapefile. A shapefile is like a map file. There's all different kinds of files. So if you're dealing with Google Maps, They have KML and KMZ files. If you're dealing with shape files that are coded or you're writing it through a map program, there's .shp file that's usually used in ArcGIS or ArcView. And then which is a paid program. It's very expensive, and only a handful of newsrooms actually get the license for it. That's why people use QGIS, because it's free and available. And then there's also GeoJSON files. This is a shapefile of the city of Chicago, and one of the cool things is that you have the X and Y plane here. You can see up or down, and then you also have the underlying data underneath it, which is, it shows like the boundaries that are associated with the names and the community numbers, and then you can start to mix and match the data. So the best way to think about map files or Data Viz files on maps is to take a spreadsheet and kind of like sort of blend it in with a map. And each of those like polygons, those points and everything else have a row on the spreadsheet associated with it. And you can start to mix and match data. So when I'm dealing with tacos, I'm going to take the same data I downloaded, and then add it to the map. And the data set, there was a longitude and latitude, which this program will recognize and then place it on the map. And we can see where all the ones that have tacos in the name are in relationship to the neighborhoods. But one of the things I can't quite do, so this is a point map. I can see sort of very simple way of saying, here's all the points, here's all the neighborhoods. So you can sort of like eyeball it and say, there's a lot over here on the north side, a lot on the southwest side. But if I wanted to sort of visualize that, I would do what's called a count in polygon analysis. And that's, a lot of people confuse them for heat maps, but they're actually something called choropleth maps. And they're really handy. You could just see like darker, not darker. There's more of this happening here than there's happening here. But there's a lot of, one of the things that happens too often in Chicago is that we kind of over-rely on that kind of visualization, which can kind of stigmatize neighborhoods, especially for dealing with crime, right? Because something might happen on a block level or on a far left boundary or an adjacent area of a neighborhood. But if you make a bucket that has all the same thing happening, you can kind of like stigmatize some neighborhoods by overrepresenting them or overrepresenting instances by neighborhood. But for tacos, I'm just going to tell the computer to count how many tacos are happening in each neighborhood. So project vector, where is my guy here? There we go. And I'm telling it to take the points, tacos, and then I'm telling it to take the boundaries, and then I'm telling it to count how many happened, and then it gave me a new map of Chicago. I'm going to take these out, and then I'm going to tell the computer to, when I look at this map file, it generated a new column of number values, and it shows here number points. So if I sort, I can see that the near north side has the most. Now, again, this is very biased in the sense that like this is only businesses that have tacos in their actual name. So if it's something like Tom's or Maria's or something like that, it's just like a restaurant with the name of a person or something, they're not going to be included in this data. So you're going to see a lot of the north side in here, and that's probably not the case. So I already have this map. This brown level has a spreadsheet associated with it, and it has numbers in one of those columns. I'm going to tell it to visualize the map on that particular column. Graduated, numbers, classify, and yeah. So I just made a choropleth map by telling it to bucket each of the neighborhoods based off the number of values assigned in that column, and it generated a nice little choropleth map. If I want to, I can display the labels and export it as an image. Yeah, actually, really interesting talk about like just bias in data, right? Like what's represented in data versus what's not. Obviously, what's represented in data is business licenses that have taco in the name. There's bias in the language, right? This happens a lot with using English names in data. Sometimes we only structure the data for first, middle, and last name. Sometimes we structure the capitalization of data types based off that. and only for certain types of characters. So the way that we structure data, one of the most important things is that all data are biased. It's going to be depending on how you decide to collect it, how you what you're going to represent in the data, and what questions you're asking when you collect that data. And everybody sort of ascribes their own bias to the data that they're working with or the data that they're collecting. So this is a fun little map file, and I'm going to export this as a GeoJSON file. And so I'm exporting. I exported the file. It duplicated on the sort of canvas here, but I've saved the GeoJSON file that has the chloroplet number column in it, and then I'm going to import it into our Flourish guys. So I'm going to change the screen sharing thing to Chrome tab, and I'm going to work off of Flourish. So here's how here's Flourish. I'm going to show you the very basic template, but it shows you a whole slew of templates. Again, this is free. There's paid versions that give you a few more options, especially if you're with a news organization. WBZ, when I was there, had one. NBC did have one, but now we're moving over Data Wrapper, much to my chagrin, but the CNBC reporters kind of beat me out on that. But I love Flourish just because it's so simple, it's intuitive, and it also it organizes itself in a way that can sort of guide you through, like, I'm making this type of chart because I have this type of data. There's mapping options. They have scatter plot options, and they've even expanded their options more than data. Like, they offer like sliders, race visualizations, especially if you're doing like polling data or like election data. They have cards, heat maps, photo sliders, even have 3D maps. I mean, they keep building on top of it. It's pretty impressive. You can do network node graphs, which are like, you see them with relationship data. Those are complex relationship visualizations. So it has a lot of stuff. You can make counters, and all this stuff you can generate an embed, and you can embed it directly on your CMS. And then quickly go back to the chat. Yeah, it's been my experience too. They're also like Flourish folks are really accessible. They came and did a presentation when we were at WBEZ, and they were just super receptive to like what we want to use the platform with. Some folks, you can customize your font. If you do a paid version, it hides like the Flourish sort of branding, and you can put your own branding on it. They're really super just nice folks that they want to just democratize data visualization. And when I say democratize data visualization, it's like, don't put it only in the hands of folks that are just, I call them programmers. And this tends to happen in the tech industry, where predominantly men tend to sort of monopolize sort of the conversation by throwing a bunch of technobabble at folks. And it sort of like says that the barrier to like learn this stuff is like, you need to know this or go to Discord, know this. That's not the case. Free Google Sheets, free Flourish accounts democratize it in a sense that I'm able to play with this data without having to have anything expensive schooling, expensive software, expensive computers, and I'm able to publish it on a platform that may also be free. And I'm able to sort of make this information or these templates usable for folks so that they can just convey their ideas without having to go through all those different barriers. So I really do like template out-of-box options because they make it more accessible for folks to use and sort of like communicate their ideas visually in a way that sometimes isn't done when you start talking about Python and queries and stuff like that. So I'm going to go and make a blank map. And I'm going to take the data file that I did and upload it. I just love the fact that everything is labeled tacos. And so now it recognized the shapefile. GeoJSON is one of the file types it recognizes. I see all the columns that were in that spreadsheet that was in QGIS earlier. And then it has a geometry file. So you see all the little shapes of Chicago. And when I go over to the preview section, it's not there. What happened? Oh, Oh, I have to assign it a value. Sorry. So the value that I'm showing is the number of taco places to count in each neighborhood, and that is column K here. And then I have to just put that here in the K. And then with the name, I'm just going to put that is the neighborhood name. That is column F. That's the, and then geometry is in column A. There we go. So now we see a map of Chicago. It's categorized based off all sorts of random things right now, and I think it's categorizing it based off the value of the number of points. One thing I need to tell it to do is to make a chloropleth map. So I'm going to take the regions layer and tell it to do numerical. So again, going back to our data type conversations, when I'm doing like categorical, it's taking each of the number counts and saying that is its own category. So if there are neighborhoods that have 19 taco places, then it's going to take all those neighborhoods and color it the same way. Same with one, or see all of one in Jefferson Park and I think that's O'Hare, or have one taco place. And it's gonna group it like that. But if you tell it to group it by numeric values, then you get a nice little heat map of Chicago. And the pop-ups, because it's pulling the name, says near, and you can see sort of where the concentrations are based off neighborhood. Any questions on how I made this map? All right. So I'm going to do another visualization using the city budget data, if I can find it. Share this. Share my Chrome tab. Share screen. Share. All right. I'm going to pull up the City of Chicago's budget, and this is the Department of Budget Management. Yeah. And here's all the city budgets for this year and all the previous years. And one of the things that I'm going to use is the appropriations data. So I'm going to click on this guy, and it's taking me to the appropriations data set. It has over 3,000 lines in it. The way the dimensions work is it shows agency. It shows like a description of the appropriations within the agencies and the dollar amount. So I'm going to export the entire thing. So this is the entire budget for 2022 in Chicago. And I'm going to download this and put this guy in, oh no, in my little FOIA Fest folder. And then I'm going to make a new data visualization. And because I'm dealing with the budget and I want to show like proportions in relation to each other, I'm going to make a tree map. And so when you're dealing with Flourish, you can toggle back and forth between the preview of the actual visualization and the data tab, which is where you upload the data and tell it what data or columns to pull from. So I'm going to upload budget appropriations. Bam. So right now it's just pulling randomly. I have to tell it in which columns to pull from. So I'm going to show it by appropriation authority description. So I'm going to do it by column G, which looks to be agencies. And I'm going to size it based off the dollar amount of value. So that's column J. And what I should get, there we go, is this is the City of Chicago's budget visualized very quickly. I just pulled it off and I just plugged into and did a couple things, and I was able to generate a tree map of the City of Chicago budget. And one of the cool things about this is I can zoom in a little bit further, and it's interactive. So I can click on this guy. Oh wait, I need to nest it first. So if I wanted to do one more layer up, or I could do G and then do the appropriation account description, which is column I. And then it has a nesting capability, which then shows the data like another nested, like those Russian nesting dolls. It shows the data visualized by like subsets or subpayments within that category. So here you can see finance general is one of the biggest ones. This has to do with our bonds and all sorts of things like pension payments. That's why it's the biggest part of our budget. Chicago Police Department is a significant portion of our budget. But then when I click on it, I can start to see how much we're done on salaries. One recent thing for those who know is that we actually started integrating our lawsuits into our budget, which is sad. And overtime, uniform allowances, equipment, stuff like that. I love this kind of visualization because you can get into the nitty gritty of stuff and see like Chicago Fire Department, overtime, specialty pay, all sorts of things. And hop real quickly back to the other tab. And ask like, so does anybody have any questions about how I made a tree map or dealt with the budget data or the appropriations data? All good? And so I'm going to, next, I'm going to take crime data. The Chicago data portal is renowned for this particular data set. The, oh, got to share it first. I use the crime data portal all the time. A lot of different cities don't have this option, but it's for if you're reporting in Chicago, it's wonderful in the sense that like it shows descriptions of crime types, primary types, which is categorized by the FBI's UCR, which is Uniform Crime Reporting Index. It shows you the case number. So if you are to FOIA a police report or a crime incident report, you would need this case number to FOIA it. It shows you location description, which is kind of subjective and biased in its own right. And then it shows you X and Y coordinates, locations anonymized to block level. The reason that they anonymize it is that if there are victims of crimes that happen, like say domestic violence, and that happen like at the person's house, the geolocation will give that precise location of that person's house, which isn't. It sort of violates a lot of the FOIA restrictions. We shouldn't have that information. But if we're doing analysis of this stuff down to like the block level, we have that ability to look at this stuff on a block level, and which can you can abstract it to like say census tracts, community areas, wards, or police districts or police beats. And it does give you all those guys on here too. And it also will show whether or not there was an arrest made in that crime. This is the crime incident reports. This is not the arrest reports. That is a different beast. And nor is it any other data set like stop and frisk or impounds or stuff like that. This is only just the crime incidents. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that there are a lot of incidents that are not on here. Incidents that are under investigation by the police department, like internally stuff. The police department has control over what data goes on this thing. So, and in the past, when I've FOIA'd stuff and did a comparison of what was on the public data portal versus what I FOIA'd, there was a lot of crime incident reports that weren't on there. So, just grain of salt. You have to use some caution when doing analysis with this stuff. Always FOIA because you don't know what's not in it, right? So I'm going to do a quick, I'm going to query primary type and then say robberies. And then this hijacking is something that is a concern lately. So I'm going to just tell it to do another query on description field. Contains vehicular hijacking. So this gives me all the vehicle hijackings that have been done since 2001, allegedly. Some stuff might not be in there. And I'm going to export it. And I want to show how the rates of carjackings have been happening over time. So I'm going to do a time series graph. So here's one of the things when I talk about data structures real quick. The data right now in its raw format, that is the budget. Is not really conducive to showing to this. Flourish cannot tell. I can't plug this data right now in its current format and tell it to like do a thing. So one of the things I have to do is like actually tell it to like group it by a year or something. So I'm going to, oh wait, actually there's a year category. This might work, sorry. Date, time, year. I'm gonna make a bar chart. Nope, I need to reformat the data. So the way that this this bar chart is structured, the template structured, is that it does it on the left side on column A is the time, and then it has the count of items in the chart on column B, C, D, and E. So I need to reformat the data structure so that it has a count by year of this thing, which is very easy to do in Excel. If I'm in Excel, I just have to make a nice little pivot table. And because this is already a pre-filtered data set that shows vehicular hijackings, but it has like different subsets of it, I can do this. I can do, I'm going to do date. Actually, it's already a year, so don't have to deal with that grouping. So here I just did, oh, I gotta change it to count. It's not letting me do it. There we go. And so this is hijackings going back to 2001. So you can sort of see if you go to 2020, they go back up. And say if I wanted to sort of split that apart by different categories or descriptions. So aggravated vehicle. So when it says aggravated vehicle hijacking, that means that somebody like hurt somebody like with a weapon, or like they versus a vehicle hijacking where they might have just did it without hurting somebody. So it's like an extra layer of crime. So I'm going to create a stacked bar chart just using this data, and I'm going to copy and paste it out of Excel. And I'm going to tell it to take year as the column A, and then the values I'm going to do is columns B and C. And here we go. This is using crime data, and I did 2 different categories, and I did time series, and you can, well, see for yourself. Gonna pause on that. Stop the meta version of screen sharing. And yeah, I'm gonna just ask if anybody has, I know it's already 11:20, so I'm trying to be conscious of time. Any questions on Flourish, on data structures, data types, or Data Viz? I know it's kind of not sexy to talk about data structures, but like your categories and what's available to you is going to restrict what you're able to do and visualize. Chicago stopped using FBI descriptions. I think they're required to use FBI descriptions as part of their reporting requirements. So I'm not sure about that. Oh yeah, absolutely. So multiple categories in the last chart. So what I told Flourish to do is that I'm taking the columns of, or the values of column B, which is aggravated, and then column C, which is non-aggravated, and I'm telling it to pull both of them, and then it so I did that by going into values and doing columns B, and you can do hyphen, if it's through a range, you can do B through C, B hyphen C, or if you're doing like, if I wanted to do column E, which is that's the old filler, we'll do B hyphen E will pull from this column, but this is like static data. So I'm just going to do B and C. And then you can see a preview of it change over here. And I can delete that and then not deal with it. What's the link to the software used on a map? Oh, QGIS. So the journalist toolbox actually mentions QGIS, but I'm going to, here's a quick little link I can send you all. QGIS, it's not an easy software to learn. I taught myself it over many and many, like Googling and using Stack Overflow, and there's a lot of helpful forums. The journalist toolbox actually has a lot of really good tutorials on how to use it. but it's good for doing geospatial analysis. You can also start to mix map files beyond just counting stuff in a polygon. You can start to say like how many things are near something or within 5 miles of something, and you do a lot of really complex analysis with map files, especially when you're dealing with the census files. I used it a lot when dealing with the pandemic. So I was doing like a lot of like vaccination data. I'm going to just disregard that. Don't save. Project open recent. Oh, here's QGIS when I did. Oh, come on. And it might be choosing to crash at this point, which is really opportune. But I use it a lot when I'm dealing with census data because oftentimes I have to like smash a bunch of different things in there. But it's an awesome program. I think it's definitely should be in every journalist toolbox. It does take time to learn, but it's once you get learning it, you can play around with a lot of different map files. It is crashing at this point, so I just want to close it. So otherwise, it will close the session. Oh, Anthony, also thank you for helping others on some of this stuff and recommendations. I really appreciate it. We are now at 11:24. Any other questions or stuff I could talk about Flourish or data or visualization tools? Yeah. Flourish is awesome. It's free. It's like plug and play. And especially if you're working, and this is the other thing too, is I think that when we talk about data visualizations and you talk about data analysis, if you work at the New York Times, you can have all these huge teams of people that have hyper specializations. Like one team does all the analysis and the FOIAs and the sort of, that's sort of where I'm at in terms of like, I deal with a lot of analysis and then I do the writing. And then I work with my colleagues who do a lot of visualizations, and they're proficient with Illustrator, they're proficient with D3, and we work together and collaborate because a lot of times that your skill sets are very specialized. But if you're just like, I want to make a line chart, I want to make a bar chart and put it on my web published article without having to deal with a graphics rig or stuff like that, Flourish and Data Wrapper are really good tools for that because you can see it's just literally plug and play. You have to do some of the analysis work, maybe in Excel or something beforehand, and then you can just plug and play into these platforms and publish on your site in a really quick time. Awesome. Well, I'm here for like another 5 minutes, I guess, or we can wrap up early. But I want to say thank you to all. I'm sorry that I can't see you all, but thank you for sticking with me on this journey. And yeah. Oh, you know what? I can also write this is my Twitter handle, which I got really earlier and fortunate. It's Chicago L. If anybody wants to follow me, I rarely tweet, but sometimes put some stuff out there. And then my email address, if anybody has any questions, you're able to send them my way, the work email address. And yeah, thank you for taking the time today. Hope you enjoy the rest of FOIA Fest. And yeah, thanks.